Once they dug the hole, they wanted $25,000 to repair. He said, I'm going to have to red tag your house and the city will come and demolish the whole thing.
If they don't pay, then yes, they use some tactics in pressuring the homeowners to pay.
They use lies and intimidation to get seniors to shell out thousands of dollars on unnecessary home repairs. The scammers are targeting an upscale part of the city, telling some victims if they don't pay up for the work, their home will be torn down. Greg Ross joins us live from the area near Bayview and Lawrence tonight. And Greg, how exactly are they pulling this off?
Well, Dwight, please tell me, as recently as this morning, they've had reports of 3 men going door to door, claiming to be contractors and offering to do work. Now, police say these men are specifically targeting seniors. They tell these seniors that they need work to be done on their homes that doesn't necessarily need to be done. And in most cases, the men aren't even doing the work, but they're demanding thousands of dollars up front. And in many cases, they're getting it. In fact, I spoke with one of their victims today who tells me she was scammed out of more than $60,000. Alice Adansky says in July, 3 men with British accents knocked on her door claiming to be contractors. What do they say?
They say, do you need any work done? We can fix the steps here. And we'll also trim the shrubs, we'll trim the tree in the back.
She agreed to pay them more than $6,000 in cash to do the work. Not long after that, the men told her they found more problems behind her house. What were some of the things that they were saying needed to be done here in the backyard?
The foundation needed to be fixed. They noticed some peeling in the cement, but it didn't cause any damage to the inside of the house.
So they were telling you that it was going to cause damage,
yeah,
and they needed to fix it right away?
Right away.
After digging a hole at the side of her house, they told her the cost would be more than $25,000. At first, Adansky said no, but the men threatened her.
He said, I'm going to have to red tag your house and the city will come and demolish the whole thing.
Fearing she could lose her home, Adansky not only agreed to give them a check for $25,000, she gave them another $35,000 because they said they needed to bring in an excavator to do the work. But that still wasn't enough. The men found more problems in her basement.
They said in order to fix the basement, it would be about $150,000. I said, no, you're not getting it.
Adansky had finally had enough. She demanded her money back, and that's when the men seemingly disappeared.
I kept calling them. They wouldn't answer my calls. They did not come back. I kept leaving messages. Nobody returned my calls. I never saw them again.
Adansky called police and found out she wasn't alone. The same men have been pulling the same scam on other seniors across the city. If somebody's coming to your door and they're asking for cash for this work before they're even doing the work, that should be the first warning sign.
That's a red flag, yes. I mean, they shouldn't be doing that. The fact that they actually solicit work coming to your door.
Adansky says she hopes police find the men, and if they need her help, she'll be ready.
But I would recognize these 3. Oh, very definitely, if I ever saw them again.
You would like an opportunity to pick them out of a lineup?
Yes, yes, I would.
Now, fortunately for Adansky, most of the money that she gave to these men was paid using checks, and now she's working with her bank to try and recover that money. She says so far they've been able to recover one of the checks, which was worth $15,000, but she's still hopeful that her bank will be able to help her recover the other $45,000 that she's out, Dwight.
Just heartbreaking how they're targeting these vulnerable seniors. All right, Greg, thank you for putting out that warning. A teen boy is dealing with serious injuries after a stabbing near Danforth and Pape this morning. Emergency crews got the call just before 11:30. Police say the teen's injuries could be life-threatening. Investigators are looking for witnesses and surveillance footage of the incident. And another teenager is in serious condition after another stabbing today, this time at Neil McNeil High School on Victoria Park. It happened just after 1 p.m. Witnesses reported seeing a fight in a nearby parking lot. A spokesperson for the Toronto District School Board says a group of students were accosted by unknown males and one student was stabbed. Paramedics transported the teen to a trauma center in stable condition. Police haven't released suspect information in either incident. 10,000 teaching jobs will be lost in Ontario over the next 5 years because of cuts in education spending by the Ford government. That's the bottom line from the province's own fiscal watchdog. In just a few minutes, we'll have more on how he got those numbers and what the opposition has to say about it. The U.S. Acting Director of National Intelligence insists he followed protocol in dealing with a whistleblower complaint about President Donald Trump. Joseph Maguire testified before the House Intelligence Committee today about Trump's phone call to the president of the Ukraine back in July, a conversation that's led to impeachment inquiries. Lindsay Duncombe has more.
Anger today from a rattled president.
What these guys are doing, Democrats are doing to this country, is a disgrace, and it shouldn't be allowed. There should be a way of stopping it, maybe legally through the courts.
In the complaint released today, the whistleblower said multiple U.S. officials were worried Trump was using the power of his office to get the Ukrainians to interfere in the 2020 election. At issue, that phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky. The whistleblower didn't hear it directly, but said several White House officials told the whistleblower they were deeply disturbed by it. The details in the complaint line up with the summary of the call made public yesterday. That Trump wanted Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter, a task he appeared to delegate to his personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani and Attorney General Bill Barr. The whistleblower accuses the White House of a cover-up, writing, "They told me there was already a discussion ongoing with White House lawyers about how to treat the call because of the likelihood in the officials' retelling they had witnessed the president using his power for personal gain," adding, "I learned from multiple U.S. officials that senior White House officials had intervened to lock down records of the phone call, especially the word-for-word transcript that was produced, as is customary, by the White House Situation Room." On Capitol Hill, the acting director of National Intelligence was grilled about why he did not immediately pass the complaint on to Congress as required by law. Joseph Maguire defended his decision to consult with lawyers of the Department of Justice and the White House.
It was not stonewalling. I didn't receive direction from anybody. I was just trying to work through the process and the law the way it is written.
Democratic lawmakers say they see this whistleblower complaint as a roadmap. They plan to speak to the whistleblower directly and seek out the White House officials mentioned in the complaint as witnesses. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
All of this, of course, happening as Trump faces an impeachment inquiry, just the fourth president to ever go through one. Coming up a little later in the show, we explain the process, including why an impeachment doesn't mean getting kicked out of office. Ontario's fiscal watchdog is weighing in on the province's plans for education changes. The Financial Accountability Officer confirmed two seemingly opposite ideas. There will be 10,000 fewer teachers in Ontario schools, but very few currently teaching will actually lose their jobs. Mike Wise is here trying to help us make sense of this report. Mike?
Well, Dwight, Peter Weldman reviewed the government's plans to increase class sizes as a way to deal with rising education costs. And we've actually got to look at what he means by 10,000 teaching jobs being at risk. It doesn't mean that 10,000 teachers will be getting pink slips. Instead, he says that's what his office calculated school boards would have needed to hire to deal with the projected increase in the student population if the province kept the status quo in terms of funding. Now, instead of doing that, the province is choosing to keep tabs on rising costs by increasing class sizes from an average of 22 students per teacher to around 28 students per teacher, thus avoiding having to hire those extra educators.
Because the class sizes have been reduced, so therefore those teacher jobs would no longer be required. So that's where our 10,000 number comes from. So it's not a cut, if you like, it's a cost avoidance, if you will.
A cost avoidance. And he does confirm one thing that Premier Ford always maintained, that these reductions could be done without layoffs. He says attrition and money set aside for voluntary buyouts should be sufficient for most boards to make the transition to larger class sizes. But his study also makes it clear education funding won't match population growth or inflation, and the NDP thinks that is short-sighted.
We're having a population growth, a bit of an explosion, and this government is cutting rather than investing in education.
The report says in terms of savings over 5 years, the move to larger class sizes will save about $2.8 billion and a further $1 billion annually after that. Dwight?
Thank you for that, Mike. Thousands are expected on the streets of Toronto tomorrow as part of a global protest for action on climate change. The march is expected to draw people of all ages concerned about the impacts of climate change on their generation and future ones as well. Kelda Ewan has more.
So it terrified me as a kid.
Marcus Giaris and Hayden Patterson-Law are only in grade 5, but they already know all about climate change.
If we keep on using the fossil fuels, it's going to damage the ozone layer, and the sun will actually hit the earth so hot that we'll all burn to death. And we should stop using coal and oil.
It's stuff they've been learning in school.
He would come home after school and say, "Mommy, we shouldn't be doing this." And I was really impressed about how he thought about it, because my generation takes it for granted, getting in the car, going on a plane, even things like playing, like eating meat, those kind of things he knows about.
All things that are being discussed more as climate change becomes a bigger issue. Leading the charge, young people like Greta Thunberg.
Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Quite frankly, it's our generation that is at the front line of this. This is why we're so scared and terrified, right? And we're fighting for it. And that's, seeing Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old girl, come up on stage and really speak her truth is amazing.
Monica Mason and Nicholas Agarwal will both be at the protest tomorrow, calling on governments to step up.
And they've had, decades to solve this crisis, but we have not seen any movement. So it's really up to us as young people, as people who are literally going to have our livelihood threatened by the crisis, to really step up and demand it. And I think.
But there are many of the older generations who are equally concerned. Adrienne Brown is a new grandmother who realized about a decade ago how urgent climate change actually was.
I think it needed to become dire enough on the one hand. Yeah, and when Al Gore was aware of it in 1960, it wasn't. It was something that was maybe 50 years in the future, and that was about right. And for me, I feel embarrassed now of how many years it took me to really realize how tremendously daunting it is.
She's afraid for the future of her granddaughter, Rowan, and will be marching tomorrow alongside thousands of others.
I'm actually quite terrified right now because I know about the science, enough about the science to understand that we have to be, and that we have to look at systemic change in human society around the whole world.
The march will begin at Queen's Park at 11 o'clock Friday morning. Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
And climate change activist Greta Thunberg will be in Montreal tomorrow for a rally there. And across Canada, some companies are shutting down for the day to allow their employees to take part. That means those companies will lose out on a day of sales. But, as Jacqueline Hansen tells us, it could actually be good for business.
This is the environmental friendly e-bike that is trying to replace the car out there.
The climate is a priority for Jeffrey Burkarich, who fixes bikes at Mountain Equipment Co-op. Burkarich usually works Fridays, but tomorrow he's organizing a ride to the climate strike.
I was thinking about taking the day off anyways, just calling in sick, but I'm glad I don't have to do that.
These signs tell customers that MEC is closed Friday, so employees can take part in climate demonstrations. Patagonia is also opening some of its stores late, and Lush Cosmetics is shutting down operations across the country. All retailers that already target young, environmentally conscious consumers.
While it aligns with our brand, it's certainly more of an ethical decision on our part. As climate change is affecting us more and more directly, we want to recognize our responsibility in that.
More companies are at least publicly making the environment a priority.
It's a huge risk for companies. It's a huge risk for the planet.
But some experts warn that taking a bold stance against climate change is also a risk if companies don't follow through.
They do need to be careful that they're prepared to take action as well.
Amazon is trying to do just that.
We're moving packages around.
Last week, the company admitted it pollutes almost as much as some small nations.
We want to use our scale and our scope to lead the way.
Now it's buying a fleet of 100,000 electric vehicles, a multi-billion-dollar investment that should be better for the environment and potentially for business.
Everybody on our team have signed this in kind of collective, active advocacy.
At Lush, climate crisis signs are ready for employees to carry at the march.
If the good press comes as well, I mean, it's coming for a good reason.
For the cost of a day of sales, it's the attention that companies crave, and some of the action conscious consumers demand. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
I'm Shannon Martin in Milton. Tonight, CBC is hosting a panel discussion on climate change, coming up the specific challenges farmers are facing.
We don't have a big voting population. We're 2% of the community. So we have a very small voice, but we have a very, very big impact on the environment.
Big day of protests tomorrow right across this planet.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I was actually thinking about that today. You know, there's so many things that come up in the news that bring us down, but there's a lot of hope out there too, especially with what these young people are doing and putting into it as well. So we can all get in on this and feel good about it. A look at what's happening with our temperatures. Well, high teens. That's pretty nice. We were into the low 20s, 22 unofficially the high. Today, 19 degrees right now in Toronto, Oshawa at 17, Hamilton at 16. Yes, we had some isolated thunderstorms that rolled through earlier. Environment Canada even had a special weather statement out for some small hail or some strong winds as well associated with some of these. That's all moved well off towards the east. You can see it even clearing out of the nation's capital area there and past Kingston now. So it's moving out of the province here. And we're getting into a clearing trend in the overnight hours. And what that means is that without the protection of some cloud cover, our temperatures are going to get closer to seasonal. And at this time of year, that's in the high single digits. So it's a cooler start tomorrow morning, cooler overnight, but a cooler start to get things going as we go into Friday. And you're going to find the temperatures maybe just coming up towards 11, 12 degrees as we're getting towards about 8 a.m. Sunshine for much of the day, then into the afternoon, clouds will be building up. Some of these isolated showers could get here a little earlier than this, but it looks like the timing is in the evening with the heavier rains and some embedded thunderstorms going through overnight Friday into Saturday. A look at your overnight low, there it is, 9 degrees and 23 with increasing clouds and winds tomorrow afternoon, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Leafs GM Kyle Dubas says he's disappointed in the allegations against star player Austin Matthews, but he's hoping it will be a learning opportunity for the team.
Because the players are so prolific athletically and they're very unique in their field, you can have moments where you often forget that they're 20, 21, 18, 23, 24, and moments like this remind you of that. And they also remind you of the onus that we have as an organization to continue to develop our people and how they conduct their business off the ice.
Matthews scored a goal in the Leafs' 3-0 preseason win over the Habs last night, but the game has been overshadowed by the disorderly conduct charge against Matthews. It stems from an incident earlier this year in Arizona. Dubas revealing yesterday he learned of the allegations from Twitter, not from Matthews. Matthews was asked about that after the game.
I think that was just an error in judgment, to be honest with you. When we received the complaint, I think, got with the legal, tried to map out a plan on how to handle the situation, and, it's just an error in judgment on my part.
The case against Matthews will be back in court in Scottsdale, Arizona on October 22nd. An affordable housing development in Scarborough has had to dramatically downsize after the province cut a program that would have helped pay for the project. We'll have that story for you coming up after the break. Plus,
would you choose door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3? MindWorks is the new exhibition at the Ontario Science Centre. I'm Natalie Nanowski. This exhibition is opening just in time for the Centre's 50th anniversary. I'll have that story coming up.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Hi, I'm Arthur Simeon, host of Accent on Toronto 2019, CBC's annual comedy showcase right here at the Danforth Music Hall. I'm going to be here with Toronto's top comedic talent on Wednesday, October 9th, 2019. Please go get your tickets today. Tickets are available at Ticketmaster. Please go get yours today. No, I mean like right now. Like go. Like right, go get. All right.
I can't go anywhere, Simeon. I gotta be right here. This week's political drama in the U.S. has had a lot of people asking just what is impeachment and how does it actually work? Cheryl Brown breaks down the process for us.
First off, let's get the term straight. Impeachment is commonly misunderstood to mean the removal of a president from office, but it's actually the process, not the result. So, how hard is it to impeach a president? Pretty hard, and that's by design. So, how does it happen? First, a sitting president needs to be formally accused of something seriously shady. In the Constitution, that's treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Next, the House of Representatives drafts and debates the charges and evidence, known as the Articles of Impeachment, and if a majority of the House votes to accept the case, the president is impeached. Now, stuff gets real, with a high-profile trial in the Senate. The president retains his or her own lawyers, the House Judiciary Committee acts as the prosecution, the Senate is the jury, there are witnesses and cross-examinations, and the whole thing is presided over by the Chief Justice of the United States. Sound like an episode of Law & Order? While impeachment proceedings may feel like a criminal trial, it's purely political. A conviction here won't land you in jail, but if 2/3 of senators decide, you will be kicked out of office with no appeal. Here's a trivia fun fact. No U.S. president has ever been removed from office via impeachment. Wait, you say? What about this guy, and this guy? Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton were impeached, but were acquitted by the Senate. And Nixon, he resigned before it could happen. Side note, impeachment is not just for presidents. The U.S. House has also impeached 19 individuals, 15 federal judges, and 1 cabinet member. To summarize, impeachment is the political process of removing from office certain public officers accused of wrongdoing. The House impeaches, and the Senate conducts the trial. But if House representatives are in sync with voters, they're also going to take a good hard look at popular opinion before setting things in motion. Remember, a ton of people voted the president in.
So now you know. More families in Toronto are going to get a break on the cost of using the TTC.
It does represent one more way and one more step we're taking today to make life more affordable for families of limited means.
The mayor at a daycare today to make the announcement. The city is expanding eligibility for reduced transit fares to low-income residents who are receiving a child care fee subsidy. There are about 23,000 eligible residents. The discount will save riders about 1/3 of the fare for a single ride and about $32 on a monthly pass. This part of the program is costing the city $2.4 million. A new rental housing development is cutting almost 100 affordable units from its proposal. The developer blames the province. It got rid of a rebate program for affordable housing. Meantime, rental units, especially affordable ones, are increasingly hard to find. Lorenda Redekop has more.
This proposal in Scarborough was initially a much larger plan. A 27-story high-rise changed to 2 smaller buildings. 101 units lost, 83 of them affordable housing. The developer blames the loss of affordable spaces on the government canceling its rebate for developers.
We work hard to get more and more units, and so it's always very disappointing when we see that it doesn't come through.
Sure, can I just get your postal code?
This housing advocate hears the horror stories from renters. He says he advised the government against dumping the developer rebate program.
The biggest issue is even finding a place to live right now. It is end times out there for people. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of fear. I can't tell you how many people I talk to on our phones or even on the street that are just like paralyzed with fear that they're not going to have a place to live.
Here's what the housing minister says.
We decided as a government that rather than benefiting 13 municipalities, which were the 13 under the development charge rebate program, that we would look at exempting new rental units from rent control, hopefully spurring on rental development in all 444 municipalities.
The NDP says taking away rent control for new buildings will only make things worse.
It's heartbreaking. We need affordable housing yesterday, and cuts to these initiatives are only hurting our communities.
As for that development plan for Scarborough, it's not final. The city hopes more affordable units could still be added.
And we really haven't had those detailed negotiations with the applicant about what they could change to improve the project, and we will always be encouraging more affordable housing.
Final approvals on the project will come next year. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
A woman who was killed in a gruesome machete attack is being honored tonight. I'm Angelina King at Highland Green Park in Scarborough, where a candlelight vigil will be underway. I'll have more on how it's shedding light on domestic violence. That's coming up.
A candlelight vigil is being held tonight to remember Darshika Jagannathan. The 27-year-old was killed in Scarborough 2 weeks ago, allegedly by her partner. Angelina King is live at Highland Creek Park, where the vigil is taking place. And Angelina, tonight's event is focused on creating awareness around domestic violence.
Exactly, Dwight. The organizers putting this on says that domestic violence is preventable, but often can be difficult to detect. IC Initiative is the nonprofit putting this on, and their goal is to raise awareness and hopefully one day put an end to domestic violence. So that's what tonight's vigil is all about, while honoring Tharchika Jagannathan. Things are getting underway in about half an hour, but I was able to speak with an organizer a little bit earlier. Here's a little bit about what she had to say.
It's important to understand that whatever it is that you go through in your relationship, if it's not okay, the right steps need to be taken. You should fight it. You should talk to people and friends and family whenever anything happens in order to ensure that it doesn't happen again and to protect yourself.
Tharchika died 2 weeks ago yesterday. She was on her way home from her job at Dollarama at about 6:30 in the evening when she was killed. Her ex-husband, Sasikaran Thanapasangam, is accused of chasing her on the street with a machete and killing her on the street. Police say that some people in the area saw and heard this gruesome attack. They say that he fled in his vehicle but then turned himself in within about an hour of the incident. He has been charged with first-degree murder. Now, Tharchika came to Canada about 3 years ago from Sri Lanka to be with her then husband. IC Initiative organizers say eventually she left him, but she was very fierce and very independent and wanted to build a life for herself here in Canada. So she first moved in to a shelter, then eventually learned more English. She got herself a job, and she even got her own place, really determined to build a life for herself here while all of her family was back home in Sri Lanka. So organizers say tonight is a good first step in combating domestic violence, learning from this case and speaking with one another about it. They did mention a few tips and red flags to look out for. One being that they say that verbal threats are one of the first red flags that are eventually ignored, and then things like neglect as well as isolation. They say if you think you know somebody who might be dealing with domestic violence, to of course talk to them and then call the police if necessary. So things are going to get underway shortly. All of Tharchika's family are back in Sri Lanka, but they have sent written statements to the organizers that we'll be hearing about. We know that she is being remembered as a fun-loving and bubbly person. I'll send it back to you, Dwight.
Just a tragic example of something that happens far too often. Thank you, Angelina. All week, we've been talking about climate change. CBC Toronto viewers say it is one of their biggest concerns this federal election. Tonight, as part of our CBC Asks initiative, we're hosting a panel discussion on that very issue in Milton. Shannon Martin joins us from there.
Dwight, we are inside the venue, the First Ontario Arts Centre. Milton is considered a swing riding, and certainly when you drive around, you see plenty of signs for the incumbent, Conservative Lisa Raitt, but the Liberal candidate comes with star power, Olympian Adam Van Couverden. Something all parties are going to hear about at the doorstep is voters wanting action on climate change.
I was born into a farming family back in England. We farm corn, wheat and soybeans.
For lifelong farmer Liz Lambrick, unpredictable weather is just part of the job.
You have a plan A, and this is what you're going to be doing because this is what is scheduled to be done at this time of year. But you have a plan B and a plan C and possibly a plan D just to compensate for the fact that things are not as normal as they used to be.
Not nearly as normal. A record cold spring this year, she says, destroyed hectares of crops.
It's definitely changing. And we have to adapt.
One of the ways she and nearly 30% of all farmers in Halton Region are doing that is by practicing no-till seeding. That means disturbing the soil less, so fewer carbons are released into the environment.
We grow about 60,000 chickens every 9 weeks for the food market.
John Upstein grew up farming chickens. One of the biggest challenges lately, he says, is intense storms that knock out power.
Climate change is an issue for us, but we are doing a lot of steps to try to help too as farmers.
Tell us about some of those steps that you guys are doing.
Well, I know we've really worked to lower our carbon footprint. We've converted all of our lights to LEDs. So, you know, it was a bit of an investment, but in the long haul probably will save us money, electricity-wise, but it's also helping the planet.
They are among the forefront of people who want to green our economy. And
This professor says candidates this election must keep farmers in mind.
it's important for us to support Ontario and Canadian agriculture, make sure we're buying locally, supporting our local farmers, so that yes, they will have extra costs as they try to adjust their fuel consumption and things like that, but we need to make sure they also have good income as well for their products.
Do you feel like farming issues are getting enough attention?
No, of course they're not. Although 100% of the people in this country have one thing in common, and that is that we all eat. We don't have a big voting population. We're 2% of the community. So we have a very small voice, but we have a very, very big impact on the environment.
And Liz and Professor Lehman will both be part of the panel discussion here tonight. Dwight will have all the highlights for you tomorrow at 6.
As we told you earlier, Canadians across the country will be taking part in climate protests tomorrow. So Justin Trudeau was painting the Conservatives today as the enemy of climate action. Meanwhile, Andrew Scheer went to Trudeau's own riding to attack what he sees as the Liberals' main weakness. Julie Van Dusen joins us now from our parliamentary bureau in Ottawa. So, Julie, let's start with the Liberal leader out canoeing today.
Right. So this is Climate Action Week. So there's been lots of talk about the environment and ways to reduce emissions. So Justin Trudeau kind of floated into his event in Sudbury in a canoe. But once he did get out of it, he announced that if he gets reelected, he will protect 25% of Canada's land and oceans by the year 2025. They've already taken some moves in that direction, but he said he would up it. Now, he announced measures to help kids enjoy the outdoors. So he would have a program that all kids would learn how to camp, go camping, and know a lot about camping by the time they're in the 8th grade. And there would be funding for low-income Canadians up to $75,000 a year who could spend, with this funding, at least 4 days in a provincial or national park with their families. So Trudeau also said he would stand against the cuts to the environment that have been the mainstay of Conservative premiers across the country. He spent a lot of time talking about Doug Ford, and he said if Andrew Scheer gets the big job, he'll continue that trend. Take a listen.
The Conservatives are running against climate action. They don't think you need to do anything to fight climate change.
So what was Andrew Scheer then doing today?
Well, I guess in contrast, he was in a suit and he was not talking about climate change, but keeping in mind he is in Montreal, where a massive rally against climate change will take place tomorrow. He was in Justin Trudeau's riding, basically talking a lot about SNC Lavalin, calling him a liar, and saying that he would bring in a law to stop this kind of action on SNC. Now, meanwhile, climate change has been dogging Scheer, and he was asked why he keeps saying a carbon tax isn't effective when many people do. Take a listen.
There is no unanimity in terms of economists as it relates to a carbon tax. What we do know is that Justin Trudeau's carbon tax is not working. Canada's falling further and further behind our targets, and the cost of living is getting higher and higher.
So Dwight, Trudeau did say that he would march in this big rally in Montreal tomorrow. Elizabeth May will be there as well. Andrew Scheer was asked. He won't be there. He'll be in Vancouver, where there will be a rally, but he will not be participating. Jagmeet Singh will march in Victoria. He'll be in Victoria tomorrow.
Senior reporter Julie Van Dusen in our parliamentary bureau in Ottawa. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
And during the election, we'll be putting together a weekly brief focused on issues that matter to the GTA. You can find it on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook every Friday at noon. The Ontario Science Centre is going to be offering free admission this weekend. It's part of their 50th birthday celebrations. After a half-century, the centre continues to draw big crowds. Nellie Nanowski has more on how it's remained relevant.
That sense of wonder and excitement is common in these parts.
It's a place where you unleash your curiosity. It's just, you can see them as they come in, they run and they want to touch everything.
Or move things, or crawl through tiny openings. To celebrate its 50th birthday, the Science Center is launching a new exhibition called MindWorks. It's all about choices and examining how and why you make them. For instance, you can wait to watch a video about kittens, or you can receive a shock and watch it now.
Did that hurt at all?
No, it was more of a vibration, actually.
Yeah. So it was worth it?
I think it was worth it, yeah.
So this exhibit is all about emotions. Each room is supposed to evoke something different. This one is a giant nose. I'm gonna go inside and I'm gonna have some sort of a reaction. Okay. Oh God. Ew, it's pretty gross. And of course, the faithful crowd pleaser is still around.
How did you do that?
I shaked it a lot.
Okay, there's some science behind that.
When you turn it on, negative charge gets pulled down through the belt. The ball becomes very positive at the top. You touch it, you also become positively charged. Two opposites, they repel each other, makes your hair stand up.
When the Science Center opened back in 1969, it was a huge deal.
Pretty well leading technology. There was nothing else in the world like it.
And now, even though all our information is online, people still see the value in it.
It's better to learn here because you can actually like see everything and play with it.
And now it's an incredible thing that all the knowledge known to humanity is at your fingertips. What we cannot access is the experience, the ability to touch or play with something, move it, see how it reacts, and also the social experience of doing that with people.
Get your science fix this weekend with free admission to the center. Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Toronto.
Had a lot of fun at the Science Center as a kid, and then with my kids. Great place.
I was just thinking about, I haven't been there in a little while. It's time to go again. Yeah, I'd love to see that piece. So many great things there, and obviously to make your hair stand up. That's always been a favorite. Let's see how you feel about the headlines I have for you in terms of the weather that we're going to be seeing coming our way. We're getting close to a weekend, so we're going to peek into that. Overnight tonight, we're going to see a clearing trend, but because of that, we've had a couple of fairly mild overnights. It means our temperatures are going to go closer to seasonal, still a little bit above, but it's going to be a little cooler. Nice day on Friday most of the day. Now, as we get in towards the evening and overnight, that's a little bit of a different story because the next system arrives and it will be bringing some rainfall with it. Really, the only thing on the almanac I want to point out are this time of year, an average high, almost 19 degrees, and our low just over 7 degrees. So that just kind of puts it in perspective in terms of things have been mild. Even our temperature right now at 19, we're kind of ahead of the game, and we really hit a high of 22. So we're still running above seasonal. And as we have a look at what's been happening with some of those thunderstorms, isolated thunderstorms from earlier, still in extreme eastern portions of the province, special weather statement there around Cornwall. Otherwise, we're really seeing that clearing trend, and that's what carries on through the overnight hours and why we don't have that blanket to give us a little insulation and keep any heat in through the overnight. Now, it also lends towards sunshine to start the day off tomorrow. The winds will start to pick up from the south and then eventually turn towards the southwest as we get into the afternoon. The other thing that happens is clouds will be increasing as the day wears on. Stop this at 4 o'clock. This particular model not bringing these showers in late afternoon, but the Canadian one wants to pull them in a little sooner, just so you know. So we could have a few isolated showers beginning to show up, primarily, though, the heavier stuff coming in later evening and overnight. And again, a rumble of thunder not out of the question with this. Then it moves through, still having an impact early in the day on Saturday, so part of the weekend with some cloud cover and some showers, and then clearing out as we get into those afternoon and evening hours Saturday, setting us up. Clear skies tonight. These are what those temperatures look like. St. Catharines, you're holding on with those double digits. The wind's getting a little breezier. Some nice temperatures above seasonal, about 5 degrees in most cases tomorrow afternoon. And then Saturday, 22, cooler, drier, but sunny as we go into the second half of the weekend with that high around 17, Dwight.
That's looking like a July forecast. What is going on with that 25 next week?
Especially, it is that's a few days out there, but I was being conservative here with that 25. We may see 26, 27.
Wow.
It's you just strap yourself in September and take the ride.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
This is the 15th annual National Peace Officers Memorial Run. The officers will be running a relay type of a race, 460 kilometers, a 3-day period. We're running with the members of SOUL, Survivors of Law Enforcement, and they are the widows and the widowers. And they're here today, and they bring such a great inspiration. And, you know, seeing them, you just got to keep up to them.
The Run to Remember started in 2005 with 24 officers and now has more than 300 participants from 30 different detachments. It started today at the Toronto Police Memorial and will end in Ottawa, where the National Remembrance Service for Fallen Police Officers happens on Sunday. To date, the run has raised $375,000 for memorial upkeep and trust funds.
He asked me if I've ever done stripping, if that was a part of my dancing, and if I've ever considered doing stripping because I had the body for it.
6 more women have come forward after a CBC News investigation into sexual misconduct allegations against an Ottawa City Councillor. More on what they say they were asked to do to get a job in his office after the break. A number of Ottawa City Councillors are calling on one of their colleagues to resign. That's in the wake of a CBC News investigation into complaints against Councillor Rick Chiarelli. Now more women have come forward saying he asked them to go to strip clubs and wear revealing clothing. Joanne Chianello has the details.
When I think about it, I get really anxious and I feel stressed out and frustrated. I feel angry that it happened to me.
This woman was 22 years old when she says Councillor Rick Chiarelli reached out to her on social media and invited her to a job interview. She said he asked about her hobbies, and she told him she'd loved dance since childhood. CBC is keeping some of the women's identities confidential because they're worried about finding employment in the future.
He asked me if I've ever done stripping, if that was a part of my dancing, and if I've ever considered doing stripping because I had the body for it.
Another woman who worked for Chiarelli for 4 years says she was sent on assignment to strip clubs to allegedly spy on another city councillor. She says she was told to wear revealing clothing on those missions.
I think I had a skirt that I was planning on wearing, and then he gave me a top. And when I put the top on, originally I put the top on with a bra on. From there, he kind of looked at me and went, "Oh, it would look better if there was no bra. And the way that it was said was very, well, you kind of have a choice, but the implied is you don't have a choice in this matter.
This woman says she too was asked to wear skimpy clothing, but was told her assignment would be different.
The most shocking thing that he said to me was that that we had to recruit men for him, and that was dancing with guys and acting like you would like to sleep with them.
In total, 6 more women are now making allegations about Councillor Rick Shirelli's behavior. They say they wish they'd spoken out sooner.
I was nervous that nobody would believe me. It would be a he said, she said situation, and this guy's and the city councillor, so it just, why would somebody believe some 20-year-old girl over some guy who has a reputation in the city for 30 years?
Rick Shirelli's lawyer says the councillor adamantly denies the allegations and that he's dealing with serious medical issues. He says the councillor will respond more substantively when he's feeling better. Yesterday, Ottawa City Council postponed Shirelli's request for a formal leave of absence. Joanne Chianello, CBC News, Ottawa.
After the break, we answer the question, what do Paul McCartney and Paul Henderson have in common? We'll tell you next.
Together right now over me.
Beatles fans are marking a very big anniversary. 50 years ago today, Abbey Road was released. The occasion drew a larger than normal crowd to the famous crossing in London. Abbey Road featured classic songs like Come Together and Here Comes the Sun. This week also marks another anniversary, this time one of the most iconic Canadian sports moments. We take a look at that in this week's Throwback Toronto.
Here's a shot. Henderson made a wild stab for spell. Here's another shot. Right in front of the score. Henderson has scored for Canada.
One of the most memorable moments in Canadian sports history was this week in 1972. Paul Henderson's game-winning goal gave Canada the win against the Soviet Union in the Summit Series. Back here in Toronto, CBC News caught up with Henderson's three daughters.
What was all the talk about today?
Well, how my dad played so good.
Who scored that last goal, Jennifer?
Paul Henderson.
Who's he?
My dad.
The next day, fans who were in the Soviet Union to watch the 8-game series returned to Toronto, some more worse for wear than others.
I'm always smiling, you know that. I haven't got any voice left, but that's beside it. I think we screamed pretty hard, honestly. We really did. It was a highlight of my life when we won that game last night.
I think a highlight for
really
about 20 million Canadians as well.
It was just fantastic. I can't experience anything, and I've seen a lot of sports events, but nothing that great.
You know, a lot of people wondering why it's still so warm, but you're saying that September, we're up and down all the time. There are years where we have this kind of weather in September.
Yeah, for sure. We get this kind of in the spring and we see it in the fall, the kind of bookend seasons where we're easing from one season into another. A lot of fluctuation that we're getting. And we're being treated, most of this is falling on the good side of things, right?
No.
But tonight, you know, it's going to take some getting used to. Temperature going down closer to what we should be seeing for an overnight low. So 9 degrees with those clear skies.
Single digits.
Yeah, a little cooler tomorrow morning till we get things going. And then 23 into the afternoon, clouds will be increasing, winds will be picking up, and then it's later on Friday we get into some rain pushing in.
That's a big swing, too. All right, that's it for our show tonight. Mike Weiss has you covered tonight at 11. Colette and I will see you back here tomorrow.